Alright, so today we're going to be talking about the best and the worst phone networks in New Zealand. So spoiler alert, there is only about 3 networks in the country. There's a lot of different brands, some brands reselling networks and reselling kind of pre-bundled package on selected networks, but there's 3 main networks in New Zealand. We'll try to kind of explain the whole industry in the country. We have extensive experience with all of the different operators. We've been in New Zealand for Laura a little over a decade, me over 1.5 decades, and so therefore we have used a lot of them and a lot of the different companies as well. So we'll share our experience with that as well. But we'll also base ourselves on a lot of facts. So we've done a lot of research on coverage, on quality and everything, and we'll talk about all of that today in details. And finally, we'll also talk about pricing, and we'll discuss what are the best options for travelers like you. Ooh, my voice went nuts. All right, without further ado, let's get started. All right. So we thought we'd begin with a little bit of the terminology, just some of the words that we're going to be using throughout this video so you know what we're talking about. Most of them, you're probably familiar with them already from your experience with cell phone providers back home, but just in case, here are a few words that you need to know. So let's get started with prepay, Laura. What does it mean?
Yeah, so prepay is basically the opposite of being on a contract. So it tends to be a type of phone plan that you can opt in and out of. You're not sort of stuck with it for a year like contract plans are.
Okay, so you just use the word plan. What does plan mean?
So plan is a sort of general term for an offer that a phone provider provides. So it's usually, we'll get onto this next term, but it's usually like a bundle or something like that. So it's they have different plans which will have different things involved.
And they're offered monthly.
Yes.
The next item on the list is combos. So is that different than plans?
So sometimes combos is another term that some phone providers use, which is essentially the same as a plan, but sometimes they could be offered weekly. They tend to be a little bit smaller in terms of their offering. So while plans might be like a monthly thing, which is kind of comprehensive plan of all that you'll need for the month, combos tend to be like smaller, cheaper plans that might not have as much, say, data or minutes, etc.
And they're often offered when you are using your phone as a pay-as-you-go. It's an alternative to it. So you use your phone as pay-as-you-go, or you use your phone with a combo. With that in mind, what does pay-as-you-go mean?
So pay-as-you-go is essentially just you pay for every MB, every minute and every text that you use. So in other words, the phone providers in New Zealand will charge you standard rates. So they have standard rates per MB, per minute, per text.
And finally, what's an add-on?
And an add-on is if you want to have like a little bit extra onto your phone plan, or even if you're paying as you go, if you just want, say, I just want 2 gigabytes of data that will last a day or whatever, they usually have little add-ons like that to sort of, just give you a quick amount of stuff for a good price.
All right, so just to recap all that, so usually when you're going to be getting a cell phone in New Zealand, you're either going to be on a plan, which is often a monthly plan, and this usually have a contract term, which is going to be 12 months or such. Or you're going to be on a prepay model, which means that you have to either top up your phone through an app, or you can buy those prepay voucher from your supermarket or the local convenience store, which in New Zealand we call the dairy. Sorry. When you are on a prepay, you often are either on a pay-as-you-go, which means that your amount of money that you have topped up, so added to your prepay plan, will be deducted for every minute plan or every minute megabyte or SMS you are using. Or you can use that money from your prepay plan to buy a combo. That combo will be basically a bundle of a certain amount of minutes, megabyte or SMS. On top of that combo, you usually can get an add-on, which is basically adding extra to that combo. So that's just to explain all those all those terms by itself. Now, last little thing that I want to explain before we get started is when are you getting charged for your phone in New Zealand?
So usually you are paying before. If you are on a prepay plan, you're usually, as Robin
So
says,
you prepay.
Exactly. So as Robin says, you top up your phone, whether that's through the app of your chosen phone network, or you're going to the supermarket and asking to top up your phone there, or doing it online through the website. So you're putting a certain amount of money into your, topping up your phone by a certain amount of money, and then basically you use that money from there. So you're always paying before using it. You always pay by the amount of credit that you have put into your phone.
All right, so that wraps up our quick terminology. Now we're going to start diving into more of the phone network and information you need to know for New Zealand. All right, so just before we start talking about the different prepay plan and postpay plan and all those kind of things, I want to talk about the different network providers in New Zealand. So in New Zealand, there are three main providers, namely Sparks, 2 Degrees, and 1NZ, which is
Spark without an S at the end.
Spark, 2 Degrees with the S, and 1NZ, which is formerly Vodafone. Then you have some providers which are using the network of other companies. Those can include Skinny or Warehouse Mobile, etc. So within this entire video, we're going to be comparing all the different SIM card, all the different plans and everything. And let's begin with the best the best pay-as-you-go plans in New Zealand. Go for it, Laura.
Yeah, so if you, for instance, you get yourself a SIM card from your chosen phone network and you top it up with credit and don't select a plan, you don't select a combo or anything like that, you just have the SIM card ready to go, then you will be charged standard rates. So it means you'll be charged a certain amount for the amount of data you use, the per MB, per minute, and per text. So Robin can go through the different charges for the current prices as of the beginning of 2024.
Exactly. Yeah, that may change. Just putting that out. All right. So let's start with the main network providers in New Zealand. So Spark without an S charges you 59 cents per megabyte, 89 cents per minute, and 20 cents per text. 2 Degrees with an S charges you 50 cents per megabyte, 49 cents per minute, and 20 cents per text. And 1NZ charges you 50 cents per megabyte, 49 cents per minute, and 20 cents per text. When it comes down to the other operators, which are basically reselling different networks, we're going to take only a couple of examples throughout these videos, namely Skinny and Warehouse Mobile, but there are many other providers as well. We just can go through all of them, in this one short video. So Skinny will charge you 40 cents per megabyte, 40 cents per minute, and 20 cents per text on your mobile standard rate. And the Warehouse Mobile, we couldn't find actually your casual rate for megabytes, so I don't know if that's available or not, but then it's 16 cents per minute and 16 cents per text. Please keep in mind that all the price that we're giving you right now are text and calls in New Zealand, and in some cases in Australia, and all the prices that we're giving you right now are New Zealand dollars. So when you are on those standard rates, you can also buy yourself combos, which are basically bundles of minute and text, and that usually comes down to visibly cheaper, and we'll cover that a little bit later. Let's transition to talking about the best phone plans for data in New Zealand. Ta-da!
Here it is.
So if you're planning on using your WhatsApp, Facebook, FaceTime, etc., and you want to rely mostly on phone data in New Zealand, here is some comparison with the specific settings as follow. We want something that has a minimum of 60 minutes calls, because still calling is important, unlimited text, and at least 2 gigabytes of data. Laura, go for it.
Yeah, so if you want, so there's a good plan with 2 Degrees, which is 3 gigabytes of data. It includes 300 minutes, unlimited text, and that's $30 per month. For 1NZ, which used to be called Vodafone, they have a bundle which is 2 gigabytes of data, 100 minutes, unlimited text, and that's $23 per month. With Spark, if you get something similar, which is 2 gigabytes, 300 minutes, and unlimited text, that's around $30 per month. With Warehouse Mobile, they do a little bit more data, 3 gigabytes worth of data, unlimited calls, and unlimited text. And that's for about $25 per month. And then finally, Skinny, they do a bundle which is 2.5 gigabytes, 300 minutes, unlimited text, and the price is around $27 per month. And all of that is in New Zealand dollars.
And of course, when we talk about minutes and calls, as per the previous segment, we are talking in New Zealand and sometimes in Australia. All right, next up, we will talk about the different plans for phone calls in New Zealand. And after that, we'll move on to coverage. If I'm correct, we'll talk about the different coverage of each of the networks. And now we're going to be talking about the cheapest phone plans in New Zealand. So if you're on the budget.
Yeah, let's just go for the cheap stuff.
Do you want to introduce it and I'll go through the numbers?
Sure. So, we just basically chose some of the plans from each of the phone networks that we've been talking about so far. Just basically, the cheapest plans tend to have like the smallest amount on offer. So typically a minimum of like 50 minutes calling, 50 texts, and maybe around 250 megabytes of data, which actually, there are some plans that are like that. So we went for the cheapest but actual still a plan available for each of the phone networks. So take it away, Robin.
All right, let's see what we have on offer right here. So if you start with Spark, we have 1.25 gigabyte of data. Brace yourself, that's the highest amount of data you're going to get in those cheap plans. So 1.25 gigabyte of data, 200 minutes and unlimited text, and that would be $20 per month.
Yeah, and that's literally the cheapest plan that Spark offers.
Yeah. Then for 1NZ, we're going to have 250 megabytes of data, 100 minutes and 100 text for $13 per month. On 2 degrees, you're going to have 250 megabytes of data, 100 minutes unlimited text for $10 per month. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, those things that resell those 3 networks, Warehouse Mobile will have 300 megabytes of data, 100 minutes and unlimited text for $9 per month. And Skinny Mobile will offer you 250 megabytes of data, 100 minutes and unlimited text for $9 per month. Again, minutes of calling and text are for New Zealand and sometimes Australia, but mostly New Zealand. And all the prices are in New Zealand dollars. Next up, we're going to be talking about the best phone plans if you want to be able to call overseas as a tourist. I know that this can be a consideration for you, so we'll cover that soon. All right, so next up, the best phone plans for calling overseas. So calling overseas is not included on most plans, combos, or anything like that, with the exception of a few countries with a company called Warehouse Mobile. But since everybody wants to be able to use Skype, FaceTime, Viber, Facebook, all those kind of things, you can still call back home with data. That said, if you want international phone calls, including in your plans, here are some of your options and things you need to know.
Yeah, so look out on your chosen phone network for specifically overseas add-ons or international add-ons that they might be providing. For instance, Skinny offers an international add-on which is around 300 minutes to 20 selected countries for around 10 New Zealand dollars. Spark offers something similar, around 200 minutes plus 100 text to 20 selected countries for around $10. So when you're purchasing those international add-ons, also make sure that the countries that you want to contact are actually included in the list, because that's always the kicker as well. Also, Warehouse Mobile, they actually include 14 international destinations in their standard plans, which can be a nice option for people wanting to call specific countries back home. So shall I go through the countries or?
No, you don't need to.
Yeah, so you can check that out.
There's a link in the description of this video where we actually go through everything, so we don't have to go over every single country's fire.
Yeah.
All right, so Laura, a bit of a blast from the past. How about calling cards? Is that still a thing in New Zealand?
Yeah, they actually are.
I know, it's so surprising. We still see them in like
I've
convenience
never
stores.
used one. To be honest, I've never used one, but they
Oh,
are
I
still they are still available in convenience stores. In particular, you can still find them in basically what New Zealanders would call dairies, which is the New Zealand word for a convenience store. You can find them on usually on those racks of cards that you're like, what are all these things? There's international calling cards on there. They tend to be kind of, I don't know if they're a great deal, not something we tend to recommend too much, but they're available if you want them.
And finally, if you're planning on calling Australia, right, if when you think about international calls, you're only thinking about Australia, well, the good news is that most network will include Australia within the NZ minutes. So just look into it. So many networks do that, including Skinny Mobile, for example. All right, next up, we're going to be talking about all the different network coverage. So the 3 different network, all the different coverage. But first, we're going back to the live chat. So, as we mentioned before, New Zealand has basically 3 main network providers. Spark, 1NZ, which is formerly Vodafone. I feel like I'm saying that like formerly Twitter, formerly Vodafone, and 2 Degrees. They offer varied level of network coverage and quality, including 5G, 4G, 3G, etc. So Skinny Mobile, for example, will use the Spark network, Warehouse Mobile will use 2 Degrees networks, etc. So if you're considering any other providers than Spark, 1NZ, and 2 Degrees, you may want to look into which network they are using before you purchasing them. So let's get started by talking a little bit about coverage, and then I'll kind of explain a little bit what those wording means to you. So Laura, take it away first.
Okay, so let's start with Spark. So Spark offers good coverage in most urban and populated areas. They claim to reach around 98% of New Zealanders. But there are some significant areas with less coverage, especially in remote areas of the Coromandel and parts of the West Coast.
Then 1NZ.
Yeah, then 1NZ, they claim to cover 99% of the New Zealand population. So it has 5G live in parts of cities and towns across New Zealand, and it plans to have 4G or 5G everywhere. It currently has 3G in late 2024, apparently. And 2 Degrees, they offer good coverage in many regions, claiming to have mobile coverage. Sorry, my phone's going a bit nuts. Speaking of phones, 2 Degrees offers coverage.
2 Degrees is claiming to have.
Sorry,
do you want me to take over?
No, that's fine.
You could, okay, cool.
In 98.5% of places where Kiwis live and work is kind of their wording there.
All right.
And that's in urban areas and some rural areas.
Okay, so just explaining a little bit about those statements right here. So they are a little bit misleading, right? Because, well, the population of New Zealand is extremely concentrated over a few urbanized areas such as Auckland, Christchurch, and Wellington. So therefore, every network will be able to claim really high percentage of the population kind of covered. But with all of them, you will have some massive swath of areas with very low coverage, including some very popular touristic areas because, well, a lot of the popular touristic areas are less inhabited places, such as, as Laura was mentioning, the Coromandel and Milford Sound and Mount Cook, etc. Right? So from our experience, having used all 3 of those companies, despite the fact that Spark says they cover 98% of all New Zealanders, and this being the lowest percentage compared to 98.5 for 2 Degrees and 99% for 1NZ, well, we do find that Spark offers a vastly better experience when it comes down to actually traveling New Zealand and actually getting to some more rural areas. So that's obviously only our experience, but do keep in mind that a lot of those percentages that you're seeing around when they promote that network are, well, worded in a nice fashion, a nice marketing fashion, and not necessarily in a factual fashion. All right, so then let's move on to the quality of calls, and internet speed.
Okay, so Spark provides HD plus ultra high definition voice calls.
Ta-ta!
And is planning to enhance its 5G coverage. So it's currently the leader in 4G coverage in New Zealand. 1NZ is known. Basically, it delivers high data speeds, voice quality with Vault Light.
So that's
what
voice
that
over
does.
LTE.
And then 2 degrees it tends to score the highest in video experience and games experience to 5G users. So if you're on the 5G areas with 2 degrees, it tends to have good quality there.
So same thing, right? If you think about that, right, that's basically only the small areas of New Zealand that have 5G, which is very limited at the moment. So it's basically only a handful of urbanized area, and then they score higher. That's great, but most tourists are not going to stick around those very, very, small kind of strong coverage areas. So Mark is asking, that's a relevant question. So before we talk about regional coverage, example, do the service have coverage map, and if so, how accurate are they in our opinion? Pretty bad there. Some of them are actually very misleading. We were looking at them yesterday with Laura, and what they do. One of them that we saw, which I'm not gonna name, had like just different shades of green, from like basically no coverage to fair to like decent coverage to like good coverage, right? And so it was very hard to actually tell where they actually did not have coverage. So we find them extremely misleading. And also, from our opinion, we have been to some places where it clearly stayed on the map that they had coverage, and they clearly did not. So that's why we're putting a word of caution on that. And that's why, after shopping, that's also why we shopped around that much, and that's what gave us the chance to be able to experience all those different networks and then land on the one we're using now. All right, so let's move on with this coverage, section, and let's continue with some examples. So let's talk about Northland.
Yeah, so if you're in Northland, which is the top region of the North Island, they have all 3 providers do have really good coverage in most places, but of course, like everywhere in New Zealand, there are black spots in more remote areas. And note that 5G is quite limited in Northland.
All right, so then what about Auckland?
Auckland, obviously being the largest city in New Zealand, their 5G coverage is extensively available there. So you tend to have basically the best internet speeds and coverage that you can find from anywhere in New Zealand within the Auckland region. So that's a good place to be if you want to stay connected.
What about Waikato?
So the Waikato,
which is very large.
This is a large region, basically just below Auckland. It does have good coverage in urban areas. The large towns in that area include Hamilton, for instance. And in most rural areas as well, they tend to be also quite good, being close to Auckland. So yeah, Waikato's generally a good place to be for coverage.
Bay of Plenty.
Bay of Plenty. It has good coverage along the coast, and that's because most of the major towns are located along the coast. You will specifically find 5G coverage in Tauranga and Rotorua.
All right, let's move on to the south end, and let's talk about the super big Canterbury area. It's huge.
Yeah, so obviously Canterbury, that includes the city of Christchurch. So there are phone network providers, specifically 1NZ and Spark, that have 5G rolled out there, so you'll get great coverage in Christchurch. And also 1NZ and Spark do have quite good coverage out into the rural areas, but you will probably find some more limitations, especially with 2 degrees in the more remote regions of Canterbury.
What about Otago?
Otago. So this is a region that encompasses Queenstown and Dunedin, sort of going towards the bottom of the South Island there. And yeah, they have really good coverage, specifically in Queenstown and Dunedin. 5G is getting rolled out with certain providers in those towns, but specifically in mountainous areas, you will find that coverage can be lacking in those areas.
And finally, let's talk a little bit about Southland.
So coverage is good in populated areas, as with the rest of New Zealand. So yeah.
But I think that's where it's the most sporadic when it comes down to non-populated area.
Yeah, so I would say Spark has the most comprehensive sort of coverage of this area, and then 1NZ, and then followed by 2 Degrees.
All right, so to summarize a little bit of the coverage and quality of all the different networks in the country, Spark is a pretty solid choice when it comes down to 4G coverage, and they're working a little bit on their 5G coverage network as well. 1NZ, formerly Vodafone's, offers quite a large amount of areas with 4G coverage. And they do some collaboration with SpaceX, so to try to cover more rural areas, but that is still very sporadic and not really widespread just yet. And 2 Degrees will be your best choice for video and gaming if you are in a city. So that's basically our kind of experience with the different phone networks in New Zealand. If you do have any questions about phone networks in New Zealand, you can head to the link in the description of this video. There is plenty of articles to help you sort that out and understand a bit more about what the phone network in New Zealand may look like. And if you want to hit like and subscribe to say thank you for all the hard work, it's always a good thing because that makes the YouTube algorithm very happy. With that in mind, we will go back to the live chat.